Near Mint Condition, the home of collected editions.
That cover's so awesome.
This is Mr. Chris Claremont, a legend.
Melanie goes,
Tired.
how's it going, all you Minties? Uncanny Omar here from Near Mint Condition, the home of collected editions. And we're back looking at another plated steel, but it's not. This is the Absolute Dark Knight's Death Metal from DC Comics. So join me today for my overview. And welcome back, everybody. So we have another Absolute Edition from DC. This one came out in June, and this is the follow-up to the DC Dark Knight's Metal. But it's also the follow-up to Justice League by Scott Snyder, No More Justice, and then the Batman Who Laughs. So I will talk a little bit about the reading order in a few, and then, of course, take a look at the book. But what I want you to notice is that we're back to this design. I love the fact that the Absolute Editions are really taking some chances with designs for their slipcases. The very bottom is where you're going to see the ISBN down there. And yeah, it's not steel, but it does sure as hell look like it, and sometimes feel like it. They did the very same thing with the Dark Knight's Absolute Metal. So they did the exact same design, except this one is, of course, black instead of the silver. Who knows, maybe when Scott Snyder and Greg Capullo come back to do another metal series, it could be gold. But this is the way they will look on your shelf. Interesting, this time around, there's no credits, maybe because the word death was added to the metal. And I assume most people are going to have it out this, or perhaps they'll have it this way. I think I did a short, or was it a TikTok? I can't remember, where I talk about how people store their slipcases in their shelves. Now, inside of the slipcase, this one also, by the way, retailing for $100. We'll go ahead and put it up. No pattern inside there. This does come wrapped in plastic, and here's the leaflet for it, and you all know I love keeping these stupid things. Not that they add any value or anything, but very similar to the design of Dark Knight's Metal. Very similar. This glossy cover, or rather, not prism. I think this is chromium. It's what we used to use, using terms from the 90s single issues. But the image in the front is the same as the image in the back, which is the case with Dark Knight's Metal. Same image, just textless. And then, even underneath the dust jackets, very similar concept where we have the pencils underneath the dust jacket. And, of course, the same image in the back. I think I may have said I wish I had used another image for the back when I did an overview of this book, but in case I didn't, yeah, I wish they had done another image in the back for this particular book. Let's look at the flaps here on the inside. You have three of the key players: Wonder Woman, Batman, and Superman. Scott Snyder and Greg Capullo being the big creators behind this. Now, before we crack this book open and talk about the premise of the story, and it's going to be a little difficult to talk about the premise of the story here without going into any type of spoilers, because this is a follow-up. I'm sure most people want to know what exactly to read between the first metal and then this death metal, which is the story that, or the event rather, that concludes everything. So at least for me, the necessary reading is, of course, the DC Dark Knight's Metal, and then No More Justice, which is a 4-issue miniseries, then the Justice League by Scott Snyder run, the Batman Who Laughs miniseries, which leads into the Batman Superman, the Year of the Villain, which isn't really an event. I will say one miniseries in particular, and that is Hell Arisen. And that practically sets up the events that are happening here. Those are the big ones. There's other things you can read, like all of Year of the Villain, but I feel like that really sets you up for what is going to be in this event. Now, there's other things that come with the book, like this map that I'll talk a little bit about later, and of course I'll talk about the build and the extras. But before I open it up, I do want to say there are some minor spoilers that I'll be talking about, mainly about the first Metal series and then the setup for this. So some of the little things I just mentioned, why it's important to read them without going into too many spoilers. Like I said, it's a little harder to do this one than the DC Dark Knight's Metal. All right, let's go ahead and crack it open. All right, let's go ahead and crack it open. You have the same pattern that you do in the slipcase here. That plated steel. Absolute Dark Knight's Death Metal. Gets a little bit confusing with the names, because when I was asked on my first overview, where do the music instruments come from? Where's the invisible chainsaw? I think a lot of people got this confused with the first event, and because of the toys. Because there's a lot of elements that the toys brought in that came from here, the McFarlane toys. Absolute Dark Knight's Death Metal, written by Scott Snyder, Greg Capullo being the main artist, Yannick Paquette and Brian Hitch doing kind of like the coda, like the extra story, Jonathan Glapion being the main inker, and then Yannick Paquette and Brian Hitch inking their own stuff, Foucault Placencia doing the main colors, Nathan Fairbairn and Alex Sinclair also supplying some of the colors, and then Tom Napolitano doing the lettering. So there is a little introduction here about what death metal is, and it's a really interesting introduction, how the story took shape, how Scott Snyder first wanted to do this as a love letter to everything that came before, but then because of 2020, when people were worried about the future, the state of comics, and when the whole pencils down from publishers came out, he kind of changed the story up a little bit, and I'll let you find out exactly what he means by that. So this collects Dark Knight's Death Metal 1 through 7. And that's it. It's 288 pages, and it's just Dark Knight's Death Metal. There's no extra mini-series, there's no one-shots in here, there's nothing that leads up to it. You jump right into the story, and this is what I mean, like, maybe some minor spoilers, more than usual, just to kind of give you the pitch as to what is going on. Because when you open the book up, you're greeted by Sergeant Rock, who feels like he is breaking the fourth wall. He's an old Joe Kubert character, old Sergeant Rock, and he's greeting you, and he's like, we're getting ready for battle, and there's some crazy stuff that's going to happen. Hoorah! And that's how you are greeted. Then you kick off Death Metal, an Anti-Crisis Part 1. It all matters. I forgot to mention that the cover here is textless, with the exception that they do credit the penciler, the inker, and the colors, and they tell you what issue number it is. I hope that DC starts doing that with future collections. I don't mind textless covers as long as they tell me which issue I'm on. And Jonathan Hickman could also learn from that. But they give you the credits within the issue. So you see Wonder Woman forging something from the invisible plane. You open up the pages and you realize that this is not the world that you're used to. This isn't the prime Earth. This isn't the main DC universe. So what the stories that lead up to this do is they introduce you to a character named Perpetua. And Perpetua is a being of all power. She comes from another race of beings that are super powerful. So think the Anti-Monitor, but more powerful. Hey, there's always a bigger fish, right? So when the source wall was broken because of the events of Dark Knight's Metal, because of the big fight between Barbados and Batman, she was set free. Now that's what leads into the No Justice miniseries, and that's what leads into the big, I think it was 3-year run that Scott Snyder did on Justice League. In that particular run, we see Perpetua kind of manipulate the character of Lex Luthor, and him manipulating her. He becomes Apex Lex, and it kind of sets up what this was going to be. It was going to be a big fight between the Justice League and this new Lex Luthor that has now teamed up with Perpetua because they have a history together more than you think. But all that changed, and I think a lot of it changed because this is during the time when Dan Didio was about to be let go. The whole 5G thing was about to crumble, so I think some story elements changed. Just doing a reread of this compared to when I first read it in the Lux edition a couple of years back, I noticed some things that were just really not unsettling, but just seems rushed, and it seemed like it came out of nowhere. And the biggest thing that came out of nowhere was the inclusion of this character named the Batman Who Laughs, who people are like rolling their eyes, I'm sure, anytime you mention that character, but it doesn't matter. The publishers noticed that things sell. And one of the biggest sells for DC Comics was the character of the Batman Who Laughs. Didn't matter if it was his miniseries, didn't matter if he was a big tie in to the villains, Year of the Villain, or if he was the big push for Batman Superman. It was a seller. So I feel like editorial kind of told Scott Snyder that, hey, yeah, we don't need Lex Luthor to be the villain of DC Dark Knight's death metal. We need the Batman Who Laughs. So that's where that little miniseries, Hell Arisen, came out. That little miniseries from Year of the Villain. And that's why I mentioned it being one of the most important reads before reading this. That sets up now the dynamic between the Batman Who Laughs and Perpetua, and it does get rid of Lex Luthor, but he may come back, and that's what kind of sets up this big event. So in this event, you don't recognize anything. It looks like a wasteland, and Themyscira has now become hell, and that's where a lot of prisoners go. And Wonder Woman is pretty much a warden down there in this hell. And the Batman Who Laughs has a bunch of little minions, and they go and tell her that she's going to get a new prisoner. Now, this new prisoner is about to change everything. Again, keep in mind that nobody recognizes each other from I don't want to say our Earth, but the DC universe, like Bruce Wayne, Batman, Wonder Woman, Superman. Those characters don't really recognize each other because the world has been remade. This, by the way, is not a possible future. This isn't years later. This isn't like 8 years later. This is just a few months since the last issue of Justice League that came out. So people were in for a shock. So there's a big fight between the Batman that could be the Batman Prime from our universe and the Batman Who Laughs and his minions. He now wields a Black Lantern ring, and that comes to play later on. Lobo's out there searching for something in every issue. So that's really cool that they give Lobo something to do. He's back. And it turns out that the hooded character is none other than a speedster. It's Wally West. And he explains to Diana how their only chance of winning is, like, what they have to do to beat Perpetua, because Perpetua and the Batman Who Laughs have remade the world in their image. And there's only one way to undo it, and that is to gather this connecting energy through the different crises that have happened over time. From Crisis on Infinite Earths, to Infinite Crisis, to Zero Hour, to Final Crisis, all the way to Dark Knight's Metal. And each of these events that are constantly happening create this energy, and they need to wield that energy in order to destroy Perpetua and the Batman Who Laughs. So it's an interesting premise that now they have to, which goes back to the title right here of issue 1. And I promise that's what I'm mainly going to be focusing on is the first issue, and then I'll show you some of the artwork. It's this anti-crisis. So in order to defeat a crisis, to undo all the crisis, and for everybody to remember everything, which gets a little complicated, but that's why we have Infinite Frontier, we have to have an anti-crisis. So that is the big plan, and that's how they plan on defeating Perpetua and the Batman Who Laughs. Because the Batman Who Laughs is how he kind of got into the mix with Perpetua and her just throwing Lex to the side. It's because he promises her the dark multiverse energy, which is pretty much where the greatest energy resides, and he has an opening to the dark multiverse. Now, what ends up happening, how the heroes get together, and all that, you can find out for yourself. This has some of the most crap, yeah, I'm editing myself, moments I've read in a crossover event. Like, some of the things that are happening through here are just so freaking ridiculous. So, dare I say, metal. Yeah, I know, it's probably cringe, but I don't care. That's about the only way to describe it. It just seems like Scott Snyder and Greg Capullo were having fun. They were just like, hey, texting each other during, 2020 going, let's do this. Nah, let's do this instead. Oh, yeah? How about I'll do that by doing this with Batman. Like, for example, if you remember Dark Knight's Metal, there were 7 Batman from different universes, that Barbados kind of controlled. And of course, one of them was the Batman Who Laughs. In this, you do have very similar members of that particular team. And some of those characters do come back, by the way. But in here, you have characters like Castle Bat, who's like a Batman. And I'm not going to tell you what he did to get this power, but because of a ritual, transferred his soul into Gotham City. So Batman has become Gotham City. There is the baby Batman, that's pretty much self-explanatory. Batmobeast, who's a Batman that's transferred his consciousness into a cybernetic vehicle that could or could not transform. There's also the Robin King, who's not like any other Batman that has come in the past, but he's a lot more like the Batman Who Laughs. My personal favorite, which I'm sure you saw when I was flipping through the pages of the first issue, and you're probably asking, what is this thing? That is Batmansaurus Rex. I kid you not. Batmansaurus Rex is a Batman who turned his body. He's inside of the dinosaur right here, and it's like a robot dinosaur. And if you're wondering about his little arms, yes, Diana even makes fun of those, and he's like, "Hey, I'm working on a fix, okay?" So it's that kind of storytelling that just the writer and artist are just having fun. This is the Robin King. There's also another character, what was his name? Dr. Batman Hatton, and I'll just leave that as is. Because what I mentioned that this is the ending of the multiverse, or the Dark Multiverse storyline. It's the ending of the New 52 and Rebirth era. This really is Scott Snyder's ending to all of Crisis. With this event, he hopes that there are no more Crisis after this, or there can't be any more Crisis. Well, that didn't last very long, but I'm sure it was all with good intentions. That the idea was, let's just make it impossible to have another Crisis, another reboot. Let's just end everything with this story. So it is a little bit of a love letter to past stories, but it also kind of takes all the past stories and says, yeah, you know what? I'm kind of going to do my own thing with the source wall. I'm kind of make my own rules with these particular crises and what their purpose was and who was behind all these crises and who the bigger fish will be. That's kind of what he ends up doing with this. So, I can see why some people were upset with the story and where it ended up going. I can see why some people didn't really dig it. If you don't take it too serious, it is one hell of a fun story. There's a freaking soundtrack to this. I remember when DC was publishing this, like the people that were making the vinyl record reached out to us. I just didn't have a way to work it into a video. I'm like, hey, here's a vinyl record. Let's listen to it together. Which, hey, if you want to see those kind of videos, let me know in the comments down below. But I think that's all I will say about it. Of course, the biggest thing for me was there's little Easter eggs like this, or throwbacks to the Superman Batman stories, except this time around it's Wonder Woman. That's one thing I wanted to say. I forgot to say, if you're still watching, that this is not a Batman story. This isn't a DC Universe story or a Superman story. It feels like DC was like, hey, Scott Snyder, look, we've had the whole Dark Knight's Metal, which was a Batman story. We've had the whole Flashpoint thing, which was a Barry story. We've had the whole Doomsday Clock, which doesn't matter what anybody says, it is a Superman story. I love that story. And now we need a Wonder Woman story. We haven't had a Wonder Woman story in a while, so it feels like they didn't just ask him to make the Batman Who Laughs one of the big bads, because he does change through here, by the way, becoming something else. But it feels like they also said, hey, Wonder Woman needs to be the protagonist, which I'm sure he kind of had to jump through some hurdles and things and get creative, because Diana really doesn't have anything to do with Perpetua outside of being in the Justice League, nor with the Batman Who Laughs. And if Lex Luthor had been the villain in this, maybe I could have seen that, but she does some badass things through here, I will say. And I actually like where the ending went. It was a really sweet love letter. There's a lot of crazy fights here that are just out in the wasteland. There's some crazy-ass characters, more so than the few that I just described. So if you want more of that Dark Knight's Metal type of story, then look no further than this, the finale. And one could say the finale of everything that Scott Snyder has been building with the whole nth metal thing, or the whole metals from his run on Batman New 52. Let's take a look at the extras. So after the whole coda that is drawn by Yannick Paquette and Brian Hitch, kind of showing you the aftermath of Dark Knight's death metal, this is where you're going to find the variant covers. And there are some metal covers. I think some of these ended up becoming, like I said, toys, and that's why people were confused about the musical instruments in the first Dark Knight's metal that did not show up. And there are some freaking awesome covers back here. Some of these have absolutely nothing to do with the main story. Now, that's something I'm sure I'm going to be asked. Does it make sense just to get this or wait for the omnibus? If you're a fan of the artwork, or if you love this particular story, get this. The oversized artwork is beautiful. Because, of course, the omnibus, it's weird to say this, but the omnibus is going to be smaller in trim size. The omnibus, however, is going to be more complete. I don't know if it's going to be mapped properly. I would think so. They've done a really good job mapping their events, with the exception of Flashpoint. I'm not a fan of that omnibus. That is just way too many issues in between the main event. This had something very similar, because a lot of the stories that are fleshed out from here happen in those miniseries, like the whole Speedster thing. Like, if you want to know more about Barry, Wally, and all the Speedsters, that's found in that miniseries. So, I think, or at least I like to think, that it will be properly mapped, and you have the main event and those issues in between. And as far as an event, though, it can get really confusing, and it feels like there's some missing elements when you're reading this as a standalone without reading all the other stuff. Because unlike Crisis on Infinite Earths, or even Infinite Crisis, they stand on their own. Flashpoint stands on his own. This really could have benefited from at least one or two of the miniseries included in this Absolute Edition. That's just my 2 cents. And I forgot to say that you have original artwork after the variant covers, the original pencils here. There's a different Crisis pencil. There's different Crisis pencils, and I think that's all I will show. You have some more Sergeant Rock there, and then you have the cover process from the thumbnail sketch, to the pencils, to the inks, to the colors. I love when they show this stuff. The bio on the creators, and then the end sheets back here. Let's take a look at the binding, and then we'll look at what that fold-out poster is. So the book has 288 pages, and it does have a ribbon. And it is printed in this thick, glossy paper. So the way it lays over really nice, and we've seen how the spread pages look, like so. Now, what else was included in here? Now, before I open this, if you came here from the very beginning because you didn't want to know anything about the story, including the internal artwork, this might be a spoiler. So just in case, a minor spoiler. But, okay, let's open it up. So it is a map of the Metalverse. You see where Gotham is, you see where Hellscape is, and you see where all of the other aspects of this new world that's been remade and where they lie. So, are your eyes deceiving you? Does this look like the bat symbol, the bat signal? No, not at all. Metal, baby. And that, as they say, is that. And if you're wondering if it's two-sided, no, there's nothing on the back. It's just a one-sided poster. If you're interested in purchasing a copy of this Absolute Edition, don't forget to check out our sponsors.
If you're in Europe and you're interested in buying these books, definitely check out Walt's Comic Shop in Berlin, Germany. They have the cheapest pre-order prices, flat shipping rate of €12 for all EU countries, emails answered within 24 hours, waltscomicshop.com, and you can use the code nearmintcondition at checkout and get free shipping for all EU countries with your first order over €40. That's Walt's Comic Shop, your reliable source for omnis and premium collected editions in Europe. Ding!
CheapGraphicNovels.com, your online home for graphic novels and collected editions up to 50% off cover price. They have excellent shipping and prompt and helpful service. Check out their bargain deals for up to 90% off cover price. And don't forget, the CGN also takes pre-orders. That way you don't miss out on the hottest releases. And they are currently running a special promotion for you Minties. If you're a first-time customer, after receiving your order confirmation email, reply back to that email and let them know Near Mint Condition sent you their way. They will then apply a free shipping promotional credit to your next order in the US. Cheap Graphic Novels, your source for the hottest books with the kind of deep discount, quality shipping, and customer service that will keep you coming back for more. And that was the content, the page count, and build of this Absolute. Let me know in the comments down below if this is the way you are picking it up, if you already have the deluxe edition, the trade paperbacks, the single issues, or you're waiting around for the omnibus. We'll love to know all those comments down below. Don't forget to smash that like button, subscribe, and ring that bell for notifications. Everyone, stay healthy and safe out there. Much love.